right, welcome to Altitude Diving. I'll be your instructor this evening, Benjamin Hadfield. I'm a specialty instructor for Altitude Diving. I'm also a assistant instructor trainer with Idaho Dive Pirates and Teach Me to Dive.
You froze, Ben.
That's a neat trick.
I wonder how long he'll talk before he figures it out.
I know, right? Wow.
I'll text him.
Ben says he'll be right back.
All right, sorry about that, guys. We're having a little internet issues today. Are we good to go? Can you hear me? See me?
I think so.
Yeah.
All right, sorry about that. We are having a little bit of internet issues at our house this week. All right. So anyway, the purpose of today's class, we're talking about altitude diving. I happen to like diving at altitude and dive at altitude quite often. Highest altitude I think I've got under my belt is 8,600 feet. So that's when I did my ice diving certification class a number of years ago. And so we're going to go through some key pieces of it, understanding the trials and tribulations of diving at altitude, understanding things like theoretical depth. So we're going to talk about sea level equivalent depth and things like that. And I'm going to give you the ideas and ways to understand how to calculate sea level equivalent depth or theoretical depth. It's basically the same idea, right? We're going to talk also about the ideas of DCS and how that can be affect you at high altitude. And we'll go through a few things like understanding how to calculate your out time of the water between dives or before you start to dive because of the residual nitrogen that you already have. So your where you actually have to build a surface interval. So value to you is certainly diving at altitude is a lot of fun. There's a lot of really cool stuff to see at altitude. There's a lot of Great Lakes to dive at that are really interesting. Just to give you an idea, throughout this lecture, I will give other places that I've dove. This is me diving the spires at Yellowstone Lake. It's a 7,700 foot elevation dive. And that's my wife and I camping in Yellowstone and all our tanks behind us. This is, where is this? I think that's McCall, the boat dock, but beautiful lake, right? So if you wouldn't mind, I will be sending you guys all paperwork at the end of this. If you wouldn't mind, print that off, initial sign date under classroom academic, as well as under took the final exam. We're going to deal with the final exam orally. But I also will send you 3 questions each. Nico, you owe me some nitrox questions, by the way, so I'll just throw that out there at you.
Me and my mom are working on those tomorrow.
Awesome. Perfect. And you owe me some paperwork for last class as well, Nico. So we'll get that over to me tomorrow. I am leaving Idaho Falls around midday to go up to Yellowstone. So I will be in Yellowstone for the rest of the weekend, starting around midday tomorrow. So if you email me, call me, I may or may not get it until Monday. So just be aware. But I will send all your paperwork out tonight, as well as some key pieces of information from the deck. But if you wouldn't mind, I'm going to send 3 questions to each of you just to gauge your knowledge. They are just light essay questions. I only expect a mere 5 to 10,000 words per question. That shouldn't take you too long. I'm kidding. A paragraph or 2. Just give me the idea that you understand what I'm asking, so that we're good to go as well. And then once I get those 3 questions back from everybody, each person that I get the questions back will get a certification, provided they provide me the paperwork as well. So the things we're going to go through, we're going to use some proper the diver diamond from SSI. I'm going to build up the proper knowledge. We're going to talk about the skills. We'll discuss the equipment and experience. And this experience for SSI is probably different than my thoughts, so I call it ×2. So hopefully we're going to give you a good experience tonight. We're going to ask you lots of questions. So we're going to talk about a lot of different things. And hopefully we'll build some experience in as well. So high altitude diving. Anybody ever dove Bear Lake before?
I have.
Nice.
No,
Steve?
haven't.
Nice. Well, here's a little tidbit from Bear Lake, provided it comes up. Watch on YouTube. Let's see. Luckily, you're only missing the commercial right now, so second. Now, one of the things you might notice on this is Bear Lake, and this was in late May. Nice clear water. Looks like a pretty warm and sunny day, but we are wearing dry suits. So one of the things you're going to notice about diving high altitude is the water is certainly colder than if you were to dive in the Caribbean. It's also colder than California as well in a lot of places. So as you go through, you get places with good clear water. You get places with crap water. I happen to like Bear Lake quite a bit as well. One of the things I will tell you that is one of the bigger safety dangers in diving high altitude and in lakes is that we have the one animal that is the scariest possible animal on the planet, and they reside in these big white things with motors. One of the scariest things you can possibly do, I feel like, on a lake is put out a dive flag, because it makes the scary animals and the big motorized things become very, very curious, and they want to figure out what you're about. So on training dives, I put out a dive flag, but I always make sure to put it out 200 to 300 feet past where I'm going to be actually diving. And I don't, farther out, so that when they do get curious, they hit the dive flag and they're farther away from me. But at least I've done my due diligence. But a lot of dives like this one, you'll notice that I didn't put out a dive flag. Other things to be aware of, you'll notice that Nikki has a nice big light on. We always wear a light. What you find is you lose colors as you go down. But in high mountain lakes, you have turbidity, and you lose visibility very quick. Let's see. And when diving high altitude, you have the opportunity, you get to see lots of rocks. I like Bear Lake just simply for the fact it's fairly clear, and I like geological structures. Just to give you an idea, this one I'm right now at 45 feet to give you kind of an idea of the visibility on this particular lake. And I can't remember if there's fish in this one or not, but at least it gives you an idea. Bear Lake is very blue because of the limestone, but it gets kind of interesting with the different geological features as well. There I am. We also make sure we always carry specific safety gear. You'll always find me with an SMB and reel, at least one, usually 2. There we go. Left side reel, right side. So we tend to try and make sure we're safe and in that as well. So just give you a quick idea what diving at altitude can look like. Bear Lake's a fun dive. I definitely like Bear Lake and enjoy my time there, but there's definitely lots of opportunity for you guys. So let's see. We go back over to my presentation. And as you guys have questions, please chime in, speak up, share as well. So diving altitude, because of reduced atmospheric pressure, dives conducted at altitude require more decompression than an identical dive conducted at sea level. Now, the standard dive cannot be reused as written. Now, so throughout this class, we will learn several alternative approaches to determining safe diving practices for diving at altitude, as well as additional safe diving practices for emergency procedures. It's going to be the key is how do we be safe? So discussion. Guys, what does diving at altitude mean to you?
I guess anything above sea level for me.
Okay. Anybody else? Nico, what does diving at altitude mean to you?
Diving it over like 1,000 feet elevation.
Absolutely. That's the exact definition. So altitude diving is going to be considered diving anything over 1,000 feet in elevation. Now, what this class is going to focus on teaching you how to dive between 1,000 feet and 10,000 feet. There is a separate set of dive tables, and there's additional math and additional considerations to be aware of when you're diving over 10,000 feet. And yes, the Navy actually wrote a book on that. And why the Navy is worrying about diving over 10,000 feet has always eluded me, and why there's a Idaho Navy blows me away as well. But both of those things are mysteries for other times. So definitely anytime you're diving over 1,000 feet. So what's the advantage of diving at altitude though, Josh?
I mean, there's tons of places to see at altitude. I mean, if you didn't dive at altitude, you'd really just have, close to the ocean.
Absolutely. Justin, how about you? What's the advantage to diving at altitude? Or why?
For me, it's that I don't have to travel so far.
Absolutely. If you
live
live
at altitude.
Yeah, you live in Idaho, you want to dive. It's not like it's a short jaunt to the Pacific Ocean from here. It's a hike, or the Atlantic, or the Gulf. So one of the advantages for me is there's interesting things to see that you won't see in the ocean. There's geological features. I love diving rivers. I've dove out in Johns Hole Bridge, just downtown Idaho Falls, and there's some amazing sturgeon down there. They get the smallest sturgeon I think I've seen down there is 4 feet. The biggest one I saw was 7.5, 8 feet in that area. They get good size, and they're pretty placid, and they don't mind you just kind of saddling up next to them. So interesting things to see, right? How about you, Steve? What do you think?
Yeah, same. I live here in Idaho. I'm always going to be above 1,000 feet, so it's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we go through this, the value to you is the majority of inland diving is at altitude and can present additional risks and may not be as simple as diving at sea level. So this course is going to prepare you for those additional challenges and provide you with the ability to safely plan and execute dives from 1,000 to 10,000 feet. Now, I have not personally dove over 10,000 feet, but there are people who have absolutely done that and are out there. So the main key points, we're going to define the benefits of altitude diving. We're going to review some Boyle's Law, because Boyle's Law definitely kicks in a little bit here. We're going to talk about some dive planning ideas, and we're going to hit that magic term called sea level equivalent depth, or SLED. I like my acronyms. And we're going to do some calculations. So hopefully you guys have a calculator. I've got my handy dandy. Oh, there it is. Got my handy dandy calculator. I keep it right on my desk because I actually use it quite a bit. And you'll probably need some scratch paper. So if you haven't acquired scratch paper, a pen, and a calculator, it might be a good time to grab that. So we're going to talk about adjusting safety stops and your sense as well. Because we're diving cold, we're going to talk a little bit about thermal protection. I think we've all got a good idea that Idaho lakes are cold. Little pre-dive checks, air delivery systems, typical conditions in rivers and lakes, some emergency procedures, common altitude dive maladies and prevention, and my favorite, not really, I like to say that though, after dive travel. So specialized accident insurance is definitely to your advantage here. And one of the cool things, and I've never heard of Dan not having an issue with this, but I also know insurance carriers well enough to realize that if they can find a loophole to not pay your claim, they absolutely will, right? We've all seen Aaron Brockovich, right? I don't think this is any big secret. Nico might not have seen Aaron Brockovich, but just realize and ask your mom, insurance companies are the devil. They're spawned by Satan. And no, I'm just kidding. I don't know that. My insurance provider is actually quite nice, and I'm sure he's a wonderful guy as long as I follow the rules. But I would encourage you guys all to make sure you have dan.org insurance. It's the dive insurance. A trip in a helicopter from somewhere like Ryrie or even worse from Yellowstone is going to cost you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000. And a ride in a decompression chamber is going to probably cost you $10,000, $15,000. So it adds up really quick. I want to say Nikki and I pay for our combined personal dive insurance. We have the nicest personal dive insurance you can get. It costs us a whopping $400 a year. So you can divide that out and add it out. That $400 a year equals about $33 a month for our insurance. We happily pay it with our little Dan membership, which, by the way, if you do go on to dan.org, please check it out. There's a lot of free courses on safety that are available to you as well. So definitely pick up your Dan insurance. It will definitely, if there's a problem, definitely save your bacon. So areas for high altitude diving. There's going to be mountain regions, obviously, 1,000 feet. But some of those areas are going to be as obvious as being high altitudes. Some of those are going to be mountainous ranges. For example, where I grew up in 30 miles north of Nogales in Arizona was at 4,600 foot elevation, but the mountains were a good distance away. Now, granted, we also did not have water to dive in. We had lots and lots of desert and lots more desert, but it was hard to tell that you were at 1,000 feet. So as we look at this, just because we don't see mountains or we don't have to climb a hill doesn't mean we're not above 1,000 feet. Now, again, just to reiterate, we're teaching you to dive under 10,000 feet. Now, interestingly enough, there was this guy, Marcel Korkus. He set a record in 2019. He was a Polish diver, and there's a whole mess of jokes that I think we can make, but we'll probably, for political reasons, decide not to say those jokes anymore. Do they still tell Polish jokes, Nico?
What?
Do they still tell Polish jokes?
I don't know.
That was when I was a kid, that was a big thing to tell the Polish jokes. And so I'm guessing by your response, Josh, have you ever heard a Polish joke?
I mean, I've heard Polish jokes, but they're not very common.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that that's kind of gone out. But anyway, he's a Polish diver, and he set his record at 20,981 feet above sea level. Crazy. And he did that in 2016. So, or 2019, sorry. But crazy enough, there's his little picture. I can't even imagine how much ice they chipped away. And my question becomes how deep did he actually dive? Because my definition of a dive, and I'm thinking his definition of a dive, are two different things. So I think you need to get down at least 20 feet for 20 minutes to call it a dive. Maybe I've heard people argue 15 feet for 15 minutes, but I would argue that I don't think he went 15 feet where he's at. It doesn't look like that's a possibility. But anyway, that's the highest altitude dive out there. So one of the things that you will run into in diving at altitude is geological features, but you'll also run into historical areas as well. One of my friends is a Canadian diver, and they are planning a dive out to a lake in mid-Canada, somewhere in Quebec. And she's going to do a 420-foot dive for research in a lake in Canada, which is high altitude, of course, on a rebreather, so they can go down and study the artifacts of the people that lived there a million years ago. So interesting stuff. But even as close as Yellowstone, we find artifacts in Yellowstone pretty regularly. It's not uncommon to find medicine bottles, beer bottles, and drinking bottles of whatever that are from easily the 1910s, 1920s. I found a 30s Coca-Cola bottle the other day. Thought that was pretty cool. I looked at it, played with it, cleaned it up a little bit, and put it back where I found it, but in a cleaner space so other divers would be able to spot it. On one of the spires, we've got a 1920 medicine bottle that we found next to the spire, and we've left it there. We've cleaned it up so people could enjoy that. But we've seen silverware from the late 1800s. So one of the things to be aware of is generally when you find artifacts in lakes, it is illegal to take it with you. It is unfortunately not like open ocean where you can lay a claim to pirate treasure. And I'm not sure exactly what the salvage rules are on that. I believe there's a certain distance offshore that you have to be. So if you do ever find a pirate treasure off of shore, research the rules real quickly and be prepared to take that another few miles off of shore if you need to, right? Just kidding. Don't do that. That's not the right thing. But the nice thing with diving at altitude as well, it allows for us to hone our skill this weekend. I know some of us are diving in Ryrie Reservoir. I am not one of them, but it gives you the opportunity to go out and play with the crawdads and have some fun. Play with the trout. In this fall, you get the chance to play with the salmon as well. So fun stuff. Let's see. Other things you can do during the winter. I teach ice diving, and I enjoy ice diving quite a bit. And I just happen to have a video of ice diving potentially. Oh, this is the Spire. Sorry. I forgot which video I had. So some of the other cool effects that you can see. Let's see. I feel like I'm selling to the choir, but that's okay. We'll share. Oh, I lost you again. Son of a gun.
We can still hear you. Oh.
There we go. Stupid Sparklight, I hate you. There we go. All right. So we're going to present. Are you guys, can you hear me now?
Yep.
All right. Hope we didn't lose too much. This is called the Spires. This is in Yellowstone Lake. And just to give you, see if you get much of the beginning. There we go. So you can see the Yellowstone Lake in the background. That's an SMB that we had launched to help us find it.
How cold is Yellowstone Lake?
I'm sorry, say again?
How cold is Yellowstone Lake?
Right now, we're hoping for 44, 45 degrees on Saturday. We'll dive at Saturday. It's Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. This is the top of the Spires. So it starts out early June in the low 30s, 33, 34 degrees, and warms up by the end of the summer to 47, 48 to 50 in that area. So definitely not a warm dive, but as it gets to 50, we're able to stand it a lot more. This is called one of the Spires. It's a former geothermal smoker that's been dormant for about 11,000 years, and it's about 300,000 years old. There's only 24 of them, and there's a lot of interesting life on them as well. But it gives you something interesting to look forward to. So this one we call Surprise, but kind of a fun little thing to see. The visibility gets better and goes worse. I don't have a really nice camera. I'm not that guy that has a whole bunch of expensive camera gear, but at least it gives you an idea of something interesting that you can see. We really like diving Yellowstone Lake.
How often do you guys dive that lake?
We probably put in 75 dives over the summer, somewhere in that area. We have already been there 5 weekends this year. So, and we have, let's see, counting this weekend, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. We only have 5 weekends left that we're going to be diving Yellowstone. So, we dive a lot in Yellowstone. You're welcome to join anytime. Just let us know. So fun stuff to do. That's what we do. So, Josh, when is a scuba cylinder empty?
I mean, like as far as a dive goes, or as far as
Just when is it empty? It doesn't matter. Just pick a time.
Yeah, I mean, when it's at 0 psi, it's technically completely empty.
Absolutely. So when the ambient pressure around it equals the ambient pressure within, right?
Yep.
Absolutely. So the scuba cylinder is empty when it equals their pressure, but your scuba cylinder is also considered empty at the surface when the pressure reaches 1 atmosphere of the same atmosphere. So if you take that same empty cylinder to an altitude of 16,000 feet. Now, this is taking into account they're doing it from sea level. Open the valve, air is going to flow out. So pressure decreased around it, so volume increased. Now, what law is that, guys?
Boyle's law.
Boyle's law is exactly right. Who said that?
Justin.
Justin, good job. That is exactly right. Boyle's law says that as pressure decreases, volume will increase. Absolutely. So, and you'll get air come out of it until it equals the exterior pressure. Now, safety point for you. In case of an out-of-air ascent, this is why SSI encourages you to leave that primary regulator in your mouth. As you ascend in the water column, the pressure decreases and the volume increases, and air should flow into the delivery system, providing you some air. Fun story for you for a moment is I was doing a dive in Ryrie Reservoir. I was doing a solo class, and I had a pony bottle, a 30 cubic foot pony bottle, so just a little pony bottle with me, and I had it on a high level of nitrox. I think I had it 55 or 60% nitrox, somewhere in there, and I needed to breathe it off because I need to refill it and use, because I was going to be using it for a deco bottle. But I was teaching a solo class, and I thought I'm just going to breathe it off down to 0, and I breathed it right to the point where I was ready to ascend, where I got to 0. I got to that. There was nothing left, right? I was at 66 feet with a student. I had another regulator around my neck and plenty of back gas as well, so it wasn't a big deal. I was prepared, and I was kind of curious. It was my own little Benjamin science experiment, right? So we started our ascent 66 feet to 15 feet to do our safety stop. Anybody want to guess on a 30 cubic foot tank from 66 feet to 15 feet? So just 1 3/4 atmospheres change. How many breaths did I get?
'I'd guess 2.
2 to 3. Yeah, exactly. It was nice. As I got headed up surface, it would have been absolutely enough for me to be able to do a direct ascent to the surface safely without having to hold my breath or freak out or ditch my weights. I did a normal ascent, but I was able to get enough gas through that to be aware. So same, Boyle's Law definitely works in a lot of different ways for us, but it's something we definitely works for us and against us in when it comes to atmospheric pressure. So I'm going to share my screen again, just so we can make sure we're clear on some terms. Now, the pressure described in units is the mathematical representation between pressure equals force divided by area, or P equals F divided by A. You do not have to write this down. This is just a review. It's not important for through this information. I'll give you a couple of really quick rules of thumb throughout this process, but I want you to at least understand a couple of basic ideas. So atmospheric pressure at sea level is known as air pressure at sea level is known as atmospheric pressure. And the common unit for atmospheric pressure we're going to use today is going to be ATA. Okay, so I'm going to say that a lot. And for purposes of discussion, we're going to discuss 1 atmosphere or sea level atmospheric pressure as being 1 ATA. Justin, is it always perfectly 1 atmosphere at sea level?
No.
Nope. Nico, why would you think that would be? Why would it always be perfectly even at sea level? Why would we have perfectly 1 ATA at sea level?
Because it's the same. Sorry, hold on.
You're fine. Take your time.
Sorry. Because there's it's on the tip of my tongue.
Does it begin with a W?
Yeah. The water.
Is the second letter E? I'm trying here for you, buddy. Would it be weather?
Yeah.
Absolutely. They say the average guy. I always love to say it like anybody like that movie Up?
Yeah.
I love that movie. The cumulus nimbus crowd, right? The average cumulus nimbus crowd weighs about 1 million pounds, right? As you look at this, so as the weather changes, we have high pressure fronts come in, low pressure fronts come in, storms come in. Like we just had that big storm that just came through here. It changes the atmospheric pressure. So that atmospheric pressure is a moving target. But for the purpose of today's discussion, we're going to call atmospheric pressure at sea level 1. It's close enough to 1 that's going to be good enough for government work today. The hydrostatic pressure. Hydrostatic pressure is the pressure of the weight exerted by fluid around us, forced by gravity. Easy enough, guys? So if we talk about 1 ATA, in fresh water, it is 34 feet to get to 1 atmosphere. At seawater is 33 feet. It takes less seawater to equal the same pressure and weight of water. Why is that, Nico? Why do you think seawater is heavier than fresh water?
Because of the salt in the water.
Absolutely. Easy way. So there's a couple of numbers that if you guys take SSI courses, and you're obviously taking an SSI course, I would encourage you guys to memorize. And they are freshwater exerts 0.432 pounds per square inch. You will see that question throughout SSI training relentlessly. Saltwater exerts 0.445 pounds per square foot. Okay? Does that make sense? You guys digging with me?
Yeah,
Yep.
right.
All right. So I would write those two down because I'm not going to say for sure, but there's a good chance, like 99.9, that one of those two numbers will be on the final exam. I'm just saying. David knows how sly I am on my tests, and that I'm very secretive about the test, right? So as we go through this, we also need to understand gauge pressure. And gauge pressure is used primarily for divers in their information system. The gauge pressure does not take into account the overall atmospheric pressure, or otherwise known as the what pressure, David? The absolute pressure. Ding, ding, ding. Good job, David. I always like to put my dive masters on the spots, and most likely soon to be an assistant instructor. I'm very proud of him. So in other words, the specific pressure being measured doesn't include the atmospheric pressure, the depth or the absolute pressure. So the depth gauge is calibrated to read 0 at sea level and measure depth in feet seawater. The air pressure gauge will read 0 when the cylinder is off and all air other than the ambient pressure is out of the high pressure hose. So cylinder pressure is measured in pounds per square inch or PSI. Now that's a key thing. I want to go back to that just for a second, if you guys wouldn't mind. The depth gauge is calibrated to read 0 at sea level and measure depth in feet seawater. So I want you guys put this bug in your ear at this point. If it's measuring 0 at the surface and we're higher than sea level, what does that mean to our theoretical depth? Don't answer now, but think about that. Is it going to be mean that we're diving the same depth? These are your three choices. This is not rocket science, right? You're either diving the same depth if you're at 5,000 feet or you're at 0 feet. You're theoretically diving deeper, or you're theoretically diving shallower. Okay? Think about that, guys. If you dive at altitude, we'll say 5,000 feet for round numbers. Are you diving the same as sea level depth? Are you diving deeper or shallower? So you guys think about that for a little bit. So we already talked about absolute pressure for a little bit. So one of the cool things about our bodies is we're designed to be in equilibration wherever we are. Our bodies are designed to equalize and be in harmony, if you will, with the pressure surrounding. And so one of the reasons as we dive, our bodies start uptaking nitrogen and we equalize out to that partial pressure of nitrogen as we dive. Now, the cool thing is that exact same thing happens at altitude as well. So upon ascent to altitude, two things happen. The body of gases or the excess nitrogen will come into equilibration with the lower partial pressure of nitrogen in the atmosphere we're at. So if we go from San Diego, California to the top of Mount Bora, our bodies are going to want to go into equilibration. It also begins a series of complex adjustments as well to lower the partial pressure of oxygen. Now, the first process is called equilibration. The second process is called acclimatization. So approximately 12 hours at altitude is required for equilibration. A longer period is required for full acclimatization. Anybody ever live or work at sea level for a while and then suddenly move to like Denver or Billings, or I don't know what the altitude of Billings is, or Idaho Falls? Anybody go to school on the coast somewhere where it's 0 altitude for a while?
I came from 50 feet above sea level to Rexburg, Idaho.
Absolutely. So one of the things you notice is what? When you started trying to run or work out or do anything in Rexburg, Idaho from 50 feet sea level, what was the effect?
I went from an absolute monster to an absolute chump.
Absolutely. No, I get it completely. One of the first places I got sent when I was in the Marine Corps was from 0 feet where I wasn't at sea level. I went from California from Camp Pendleton, California to Denver, Colorado. I had been running 17-minute 3-mile PFTs like they were candy. No big deal. I got to Denver and I did my first run and I ran an 18:30. I lost a minute and a half, almost 2 minutes on my 3-mile run. And I thought I was going to die. I absolutely was sure I was going to die, to be honest with you. I ran a fast PFT, and it was the first time when I was in the Marine Corps I didn't run a perfect PFT of 18 minutes or less. I thought for sure. What was happening was that my body had not had the opportunity to fully equalize to that new pressure. Now, anybody ever climb a mountain and feel lightheaded, dizzy, maybe a little nauseous or sick, sore in the joints?
Oh, yeah.
My first time on Bora.
Absolutely. How about you, Steve? You ever have that happen to you or climb a mountain?
Oh yeah, I've climbed Bora. It sucks from 11 to 12.
Absolutely. Absolutely sucks. You feel nauseous, you're tired, feel a little lightheaded sometimes. It sucks. Now, here's your interesting thing for the day. We call it altitude sickness, but what else? There's another term we could call it, but that's a dive term. When you don't feel good and you've just climbed a mountain, what's that other term? What kind of sickness have we just gotten?
Decompression.
Absolutely. Caisson's disease, decompression sickness. Altitude sickness is a form of DCS, decompression sickness. Have you guys ever thought about that before?
No.
Yeah, it's the same thing as if I ascend too quickly in the water column and I let the nitrogen out of my system too quickly, I get DCS. If I climb a mountain very quickly and I don't allow myself to go up slowly enough where I'm able to bring my body into equilibration, all of a sudden I have a good chance of getting nitrogen, a nitrogen problem, which would be DCS. So we need to be aware of that, because one of the things we'll find is a lot of times the places we want to dive are going to be higher than the elevation we're currently at. For example, I drive to Yellowstone. I go from 5,000 foot elevation to almost 8,000 foot elevation. So my body's going to take time to come into full equilibration, allow that excess of nitrogen to equalize. And that's what I say is it takes 12 full hours for your body to go into perfect equilibration of the surroundings and allow that nitrogen to come out. Same thing with diving. So you can do a new dive day after 12 hours, but if you drive straight from here to Yellowstone, you need to take into account you have residual nitrogen in your system that's going to be a challenge. Same thing of diving. Why don't we fly after diving? Justin, why don't we just go for a dive in Ryrie and then an hour later we go hop on a plane and fly to Denver? Did I lose Justin? Did Justin realize he's muted?
I was muted. It's the same reason when you fly, you go way high in altitude, so there's a lot of decompression there.
Absolutely. So that the same thing we're dealing with diving coming up. Same thing we need to realize that our bodies need to take time to come into equilibration and reduce that nitrogen so that we're able to be safe. So if I drive straight from here to Yellowstone, I need to take into account that I have residual nitrogen in my system and take that into account, because on a repetitive dive, I have residual nitrogen. I mean, what happens because of residual nitrogen, Joshua, on a dive? Am I able to dive the same amount of time I did on the first time, or is there a reduction?
I mean, it depends on how long you dove the first dive, but yeah, you get a reduction in your total potential time underwater.
Absolutely, because of residual nitrogen. I already have residual nitrogen. So the first thing I want you guys to really kind of grasp onto is elevation sickness is DCS. It's a decompression sickness. Okay, that's kind of concept number one. Concept number two I want you to grasp onto is, as I drive to these higher altitudes, I need to realize that if I jump out of the car and go for a dive, I'm doing a repetitive dive. It will not count as my first dive of the day. Now, if it's a small gain in altitude, it's going to be the same as if I did a very small dive. But if I gain a lot of altitude, I need to realize that I'm on a repetitive dive now, and I need to take into account that with the tables. Now, does everybody have access to the MySSI app?
Yeah.
Fantastic. If you guys wouldn't mind pulling out your MySSI app on your phone, hopefully you're not on your phone currently. All right. I don't know how. I think when it just magically changes, which cracks me up. Let's see. My SSI. And if you wouldn't mind, once you go on the. David, are you trying to be on multiple? Okay. You got to.
I'm just switching to my computer so I can use my phone for the app.
There we go. So go to my SSI app, and what you'll find is the tables. It'll be a green. There you go. Green button. It says tables. What we're looking for is the combined air nitrox, EAN nitrox tables. Okay. Please open that in English version and Imperial because it'll make your life a little easier. And specifically, we're looking for table 2. Does everybody find table 2?
Yep.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're going to need that in a moment, but I want to make sure you guys all had access to it easily enough. Let's see. So just, let's see, we've already got that one. I don't need to recover that. Here we go. So I'm going to put this on the screen to make your guys' life a little easier. So as we look at this, do I need to back up? So if a diver begins a dive at altitude within 12 hours of arrival, the residual nitrogen left over from sea level must be taken into account. And in fact, the initial dive at altitude can be considered a repetitive dive, and the first dive being the ascent from the altitude from sea level. So a simple way to figure this is to increase your residual nitrogen group by 1 letter group for every 1,000 feet of gain in elevation. Now, that is something I would definitely take a note on because this is Benjamin only math. I did the math on this, and this is the easiest way to do this. So for every 1,000 feet of elevation you gain, you need to move up 1 letter group in the My SSI table, and that's going to be on table 2. So if Jim drives from Idaho Falls, which is elevation of 4,500 feet, to Yellowstone Lake, 7,500 foot elevation. Remember, I was nice to you guys that I used all even numbers. Jim will gain 3,000 feet in elevation. Now, to compensate for this elevation increase, Jim will need to start his dive as a letter group D diver. 1, 2, 3. So he's already a letter. So 1, 2, 3. There we go. We don't count the first one. 1, 2, 3. So he's a letter group D, which means to become an A group diver, he needs to be out of the water, not diving for 5 hours and 49 minutes. Simple enough. So 1 letter group for every 1,000 feet gain in elevation. 1, 2,
So
3.
you're starting from A then as 1.
Correct.
Starting at A, and then B would be 1, C 2, D 3.
Exactly.
Okay.
We do that for 1 additional safety level as well. So we move 1 letter group. And so we know that his new, we can figure out his nitrogen level group based upon the SSI dive tables. So if you do this, this will allow you to figure out what your residual nitrogen point is. Now, just to make sure we got this, Nico, if I drove from San Diego to Denver, and Denver is at 6,000 feet elevation roughly, it's mile high, right? We're gonna call it 6,000 feet elevation to make your life easier. What letter group will I be when I touch down in Denver?
So we're starting as a D.
We're going 6,000 feet. What letter group am I if I start? It's for 6,000 feet. From 0 to 6,000 feet to change.
Like an F.
Now remember, we count. The A is 0.
Okay.
So if we count A as 0, you were close. Let's move it over 1 more and let's call it a G.
Okay. My SSI app's not opening,
Oh no!
so
I can send you a PDF of this table as well. It's definitely a good idea to have a copy of this handy. And you can also order one of these, a plastic one of these from the dive shop.
okay.
So just remember, for every 1,000 feet of elevation, counting A as a 0, 1, 2, 3, 1,000 feet equals 1 letter group. Easy enough, guys? Pretty straightforward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And And again, what I will do at the end of this presentation is I will email you the pegs that you need. Does that sound fair?
Yeah.
So I would definitely encourage you to take notes, but I try and make your life a little easier by giving you notes as well. So easy enough.
So just out of curiosity, does it also work in reverse?
That's an excellent question. Are you saying that
If you were a G and you descended 2,000 feet, would you go down 2 levels? I mean, it probably wouldn't be good to plan it that way for safety, but
well, you're descending, so you're adding nitrogen to the system, so it would work in reverse. So, but if you're already an A group diver and you're at 5,000 feet elevation and you drop to 1,000 feet of elevation,
Still an A group.
you're still an A group diver.
yeah, but if you started as a G group and then you descended to another dive.
Sure, you descended to another altitude.
Yeah, so you dove in Yellowstone and then you came back to Idaho Falls and dove in Ryrie.
Sure, it would absolutely work in reverse. So I'd gain one letter group for every 1,000 feet, but I also need to take into account the time it took me to get there as well.
Yep.
But yeah, it absolutely would, because you're gaining and losing nitrogen, right? As you're going up to altitude, you're allowing your body to off gas that nitrogen. As you're going down and descending, you're still descending, so you're gaining letter groups because you're still descending, but you're not coming up past. So absolutely, that's an interesting question, Josh. I hadn't considered that. So good thought. Now, one of the things I would like to throw out there at you guys: how many of you guys are dry suit divers other than David and Josh, soon to be?
So
I
Not
heard
yet.
say Justin.
Not yet.
How about you, Steve?
No, it's on my bucket list.
Awesome. I would go over to the dive shop. There is something going on with Fusion dry suits, Fusion Sports right now. So they are discontinuing them, and there might be an opportunity to pick up a dry suit a little less expensive. I've dove a Fusion dry suit for years and love it. It's an easy dry suit to dive. So Josh, I think you're getting a Fusion Sport, and I think you might save some money because they're on closeout.
oh, good.
And I believe they have your size, because I was over there today, by the way.
Well, she already ordered mine. So
okay, she did. I would. When did she order it? I guess.
she last week, sometime last Thursday, I think.
Okay, I might call over and ask if they're doing a Fusion Sport for you or a Fusion Bullet. So, because I heard them talking about it today.
For sure, Bort, because we had a big discussion about it. I'm going to go over there tomorrow morning anyway to.
Yeah, go talk to them about the Bullet, because I think they've had or the Bullet versus the Fusion, because I think they have a Bullet or a dry suit for you that you might save some money on in the Sport. So talk to them about that. I heard them talking about that today, and they specifically mentioned you, so just be aware.
Okay.
All right. So one of the things I'd like to throw out at you guys is, if you are a dry suit diver or thinking about it, ice diving is amazing. I love teaching ice diving. David will tell you. The only part about ice diving I don't like is carrying the crap across the goddamn stinking ice or cutting the hole. But that's what students are for, right? So I want to give you guys the full experience. And as David will tell you, we do not concierge dive when it comes to ice diving. Everybody helps. Yes, I make David cut the hole. That's my secret. But it's called it takes a village to ice dive. Nobody ice dives alone, but it's definitely a lot of fun. I am definitely an ice diving instructor. We had 4 sessions this year. It was awesome. I don't remember how many ice divers we certified. We certified a bunch and had a great time doing it. That's for sure. So this is on the lower left. That's Nikki and I getting ice certified at Strawberry Reservoir, about 8,600 foot elevation, 24 inches of ice. This is one of my first ice dives ever. It was only about 14 inches of ice there. And then this is last season. And the ice was only about 16 inches thick. So it was nice and thick this year. Definitely something fun and interesting to do. I encourage taking a run at ice diving. I enjoy it thoroughly. That is for sure. Let's see. Do we have a YouTube video for this? Here we go. Give me a second, and I will throw this on the screen so you guys can see a little ice diving. Share screen. Wish I could have multiple screens ready to share at the same time. That'd be awesome. and I'll save you as music. But starts off with, we cut the hole, then we scoop the crap out of the hole. We do it in a very, very safe location to make sure that everybody's safe. But here you can see the ice was only about 14 inches thick. There's my blushing bride and myself. Nikki really, really loves ice diving. She didn't think she was going to like it as nearly as much as she does, but she definitely likes it. We did little interviews here. As we get ready to ice dive, my internet is horrible today. Holy cow. Sparklight is not doing me any justice today. So if you have Sparklight, this is what it looks like, or if you're thinking about getting Sparklight. I don't know if you can see it there at the bottom, but there's going in the hole. And then that's what it actually looks like, going in the hole and then looking back up. It is, I think it's amazing. I love ice diving. There we go. There's Nikki getting ready to go in the hole. We tie you off and we have a rope tender at the top to make sure that you are safe. We also have a safety diver. We had a pretty small crew. This is actually 2 years ago. Not this season, not the season before last, but the season before that. Water is about 38 degrees, roughly. You definitely want a light. We do some safety things that are pretty cool. This is our friend Ashley Knight. She works for National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. Kind of fun. She'd never dove under the ice before. She said, I dove among the ice, but never under the ice. I've never quite figured out why we carry SMBs on an ice dive, but we do, because you can't really launch an SMB on an ice dive. So kind of a funny thing. We do it. I don't know why. And there we go, descending. Lots of bubbles. And then there we go. Looking up at the ice is kind of fun. That's the ice shelf. So anyway, that gives you kind of an idea of what the ice looks like. Let's see. Let me go back and share the other screen. Any questions so far? We haven't covered a ton, but we've covered some cool stuff. Anybody got any thoughts on theoretical depth? Is it going to be deeper, the same, or shallower? David, don't answer. If you know
My
the
guess
answer,
is in theory you'd be deeper.
okay. What do you think, Nico? Deeper, shallower, or the same?
Probably around the same, maybe like a little deeper or shallower, but like around the same kind of.
Around the same? Okay. Any other guesses?
Yeah, deeper.
Deeper it is. Okay. So we've got 2 for deeper, 1 for about the same. The answer is deeper, though, by the way. And that has to do with the ambient pressure overall. So let me go back to share my screen. Take me just a second here. Present. Share screen. Let me get faster at this. There we go. All right. So sea level plan equivalent depth planning. So the theoretical depth calculations for altitude diving. So sample should be calculated as sea level equivalent depth table using the atmospheric pressure or the hectopascal pressure unit, the HPU. Now note, most common dive tables rely on a minimum hydrostatic cap of 1 atmosphere. Okay, so we'll add Steve back in. I'm glad I'm not the only one having a tough time with the internet. That makes me feel better. So one of the things you can do that is pretty slick, if you guys will notice in the upper, let's see if it'll focus there. There we go. There is an app for barometric pressure, and it works very, very well. As I pull it up right now at 4,719 feet of elevation, our current atmospheric pressure is 0.8482. It's a free app, by the way. I don't actually pay for that, so it's kind of handy. So here's how we figure this out and do the actual math. Now, here's the good news is I will send the math to you, so you don't have to memorize it, but you might just take some notes. I will also in a moment, I'm going to give you the cheater's note that you can, where you can figure this out within about 5% in your head every single time. So I'd like to show you the math, and then I will show you how to cheat at it. Does this sound fair, guys?
Yeah.
So the formula for it is the equivalent depth is equal to the actual depth times pressure 1 divided by pressure 2. And those are atmospheric pressure. So the example of that, if the equivalent depth, to find the equivalent of depth of 49 feet fresh water at 4,000 feet sea level. Now, the first thing we need to do is equivalent depth is 49 feet divided by, or times 1 divided by 0.864. The 0.864 is our altitude atmospheric pressure in hectopascals. I pulled that straight from my little freebie app that's on here. It's probably a little different right now. Yeah, it's pretty close though. Right now it says 8482, so it varies. So with this, the day I put this in, it was 0.864. So we simply divide 1, which is sea level, divided by 0.864. You guys follow me so far?
Which
That
is
equals
the
out.
pressure at elevation at the 4,000 feet.
Yep, exactly. So that equals out to 1.157. Now all I need to do is multiply 1.157 divided or multiplied by 49 feet gives us a new equivalent depth of 57 feet. So what we do is we're taking the difference between pressure 1, altitude, divided by pressure 2, which is the pressure and hectopascals at sea level. We divided those across to give us a metric or a percentage function. Simple enough. Now the good news is there's also plenty of places online where you can go to online and you can get the chart, or you can actually punch it in. But and it's very easy to do that. But there's an easier way to do this. There's absolutely a ton easier way to do this, and we're going to get there. So if the theoretical difference between atmospheric pressure and sea level is dividable, then we can simply multiply that by. So in this particular case, sea level was 0.9927. Altitude at pressure at station was at 0.83. We divided those two. We came up with 1.1586. So our theoretical depth was 15.86 deeper than our actual depth. So if we were to do a 100-foot dive at this atmospheric pressure, we'll actually be diving to 116 feet, theoretical or sea level equivalent depth. Simple enough, guys? Now, who wants the two easiest way to cheat on not have to memorize this math? Anybody want the cheater math?
Sure.
Okay, good. I want to make sure, because every once in a while you get those masochists. They're like, no, I want to do the math every single time. And honestly, guys, I hate to tell you, I actually do the math every single time. But quick tools. You can actually go to something called Dive Buddy mobile calculators. And let's go ahead and open the link. This is online. It is free, and the link will be in the pegs that I'm going to send you. Share screen. And believe it or not, I've got an easier one than this. So here's divebuddy.com. All kinds of cool stuff at divebuddy.com. If we know right now that we're diving at Ryder Reservoir at its 5,000 feet elevation, and we're going to be doing a dive to 80 feet, calculate, it'll do all the math for us. So your theoretical depth is now 94 feet of seawater when planning your dive. Make sure to do your safety stop at 13 feet fresh water. The surface pressure is 0.832. So it cheats for you. It'll tell you. There's a little calculator for this. It's not rocket science. Now, guys, let's talk about this for a moment, though. Why are we doing a safety stop at 13 feet instead of 20?
Because theoretically, that would be similar to 15 feet seawater.
Yeah, absolutely. It's theoretically deeper. So we want you to do a shallower safety stop because we have an equivalent pressure. Now, here's a magic question for you, Josh. We're diving at altitude of 7,600 feet. We're accustomed to doing an ascent at 33 feet per minute. Should we slow down?
Yeah, probably, because that's technically more. Well, your adjusted depth or your adjusted difference would be more than 33 feet.
Absolutely. So we're ascending faster than what we think. Now, interesting enough, anybody ever dived the Homestead Crater?
No.
I have.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, it's not the most exciting dive in the entire world, but did you know when you sign the waiver at Homestead Crater, you agree in the paperwork that you will not do an ascent faster than 20 feet per minute? Check their waiver next time you're there and look at it. You agree because you're diving a 6,000 foot elevation to do a 20 foot per minute ascension rate. Why is that, guys? Justin, why do you think we're doing such a slow ascent rate?
Because of the theoretical depth.
Absolutely. We're rising faster in the water column than what we think. So be aware. It's absolutely a thing. Now, here's another question for you guys. Steve, if I'm in Yellowstone Lake and I've come up to my 13-foot safety stop, should I account for a little longer safety stop or a shorter safety stop?
I would say a longer safety stop.
Absolutely. The longer safety stop never hurt anybody to start with anyway, but because we're diving at theoretical depth, but we've also got the added bonus, we're diving in cold water, which reduces the body's ability to off-gas nitrogen too. So we start adding multiple problems to a situation. Adding an additional margin of safety is to your advantage. I always encourage having a good method of safety anyway, but it's just to your advantage to make sure that you add that additional safety with altitude as well. I wonder if this will work better. So let me go back to sharing my screen. Now, who wants the super duper cheater math? I already gave you the cheater math. Who wants the super duper cheater math? Nobody?
Why not?
Why not? I have this. Here's the super duper cheater math for you for the day. If you can remember the previous one, here's how to figure out your new theoretical depth for any altitude without having to look at the barometer, and it'll get you pretty darn close, usually with about 5 to 8%. If you add 3.5% to your depth for every 1,000 feet you ascend, you'll be within pretty close of where you should be. So if I was at 7,600 foot elevation, I can multiply 3.5 times 7.6, and I know that I'm diving 26.6%, so 27% deeper than what I think. So, Nico, if I'm diving 27% deeper than what I think, and I go to 100 feet, how deep am I?
You said 27%.
Yep, and I go to 100 feet. How much deeper am I?
You're
What is my new sea level equivalent depth?
hold on. Oh my gosh. I don't know.
So would I be 127 feet?
Oh. Yeah. Probably. Yeah.
Yep, absolutely. So easy enough to figure out. If I can remember 3.5% deeper for every 1,000 feet, it'll absolutely get me in the ballpark. Now, again, one of the cool things you can do is you can either memorize that 3.5%, or you can actually print off one of these cool dive tables, and it'll be in your homework as well. I will make sure to add this handy dandy sea level equivalent chart. Now, interesting enough, anybody know where I got this handy dandy sea level equivalent depth table?
Is it on the app?
It is not on the app.
Really?
They have one similar to this, but this one is not on the app. There should be one on the app. I got this from the Navy. The Navy did extensive research at altitude diving to figure all this math out for us to make our life easier. If you ever get a chance, the Navy dive table version 7 is very good. It's I've seen a physical copy of version 8, but it's not much different than version 7. So there is a wonderful about 30 pages in their chapter on altitude diving between 1 and 10,000 feet. And then they have a very interesting supplement for their 10,000 and above altitude diving. Basically, the crust of the idea of 10,000 feet and above is you take all this math and you add an additional 15% safety margin. That's really that's the biggest thing that I can tell you. It's about a 15% additional safety margin, interesting enough. So there's your cheater math for the day. So if we can remember that we change how many letter groups for each 1,000 feet when we ascend altitude. One altitude, yep. And we always count A as a 0. A is our 0. B is our first point where we actually count 1. Fair enough?
Yep.
And as we rise in altitude, we remember to always add how much per 1,000 feet.
3.5%.
3.5%. Simple enough. All right. Review questions as we go along here. Add to stream. A flexible gas container is submerged to 33 feet freshwater at an altitude of 3,000 feet. At that depth, it has a volume of 1 cubic foot. What will the volume be when it reaches the surface?
So 33 feet.
If you wouldn't mind, type it in the comments. There's a chat on the right-hand side. I feel like I need to get Jeopardy music. Doo-doo-doo-doo. Did everybody find the chat? All right. Josh has answered. Who's got the next one? Remember, you're at 3,000 foot elevation. So, Josh, would you like to revisit your answer? David, would you like to revisit your answer? You're at 3,000 feet elevation. I see David revisited his answer. Josh revisited his answer. Steve, what do you think? 33 feet, 1 full atmosphere. Justin's got it right.
B. Oh, D. Good job, Justin.
D is the correct answer. And the reason being, remember, at 1 atmosphere, let me remove this. There we go. At 1 atmosphere, we're making 1 full atmospheric change. So at 33 feet down from sea level, we're now at 2 atmospheres. So if we did all this at sea level, we double it, right? We halve the pressure or double the pressure. So as we go from 0 to 33, it's a 50% pressure change as we go down. So it's half. So 1 cubic foot of air is equal to a half a cubic foot of air at sea level. And at sea level, 1 cubic foot of air at 33 feet is equal to 2 cubic feet at the surface. But now remember, we're actually going deeper than what we said originally. In fact, in this case, because we are going 3,000 feet deeper, 3,000 feet, it's not deeper, I'm sorry, 3,000 feet higher in elevation.
36.46.
Yep, exactly. So now it's going to be 2.21. So we're going to have more volume because we're actually deeper. We're creating a much deeper pressure change because of that. Does that make sense, guys?
Kinda.
Yeah.
It gets confusing, but once you get your head around it, it's good. So discussion. What's the most accurate way to determine your sea level equivalent depth, guys? We've looked at 3 different ways. At least 3. We've looked at 3 ways to come up with the sea level equivalent depth. We looked at the math, utilizing the hectopascals. We looked at just using a chart, and we looked at the Benjamin's cheater way. What do you think, Nico? Which one's going to be the most accurate way to do it?
Probably the 3.5. Wait, yeah. Probably multiplying it by 3.5%.
Okay. Now I'll give you the hint. That's the cheater way, and the cheater way is going to be in the ballpark with it about 5 to 8%. So unfortunately, the 3.5% is great. Please use that. It works. But in terms of accuracy, if we were going to do a technical dive to 400 feet in Yellowstone Lake, which one should we use?
I would use the Dive Buddy one.
The Dive Buddy one works great too. Absolutely. It's going to be very accurate. But what is it missing?
I don't know, but it takes a human error out of it for me.
It does. But what is it missing? What is the variance? So why would it be not quite as accurate as doing the math?
Well, doing the math, you'd probably want to take your measurement of your actual barometric pressure or the atmospheric pressure where you're at, so you have an actual number instead of theoretical number or an approximate number.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is if you're trying to get to ultimate accuracy, as I'm sitting here watching my station pressure on the in hectopascals, it's already changed. It was 0.8487. It's 8.8486 right now. And I've seen it as high as 0.86. So it definitely changes by station pressure based upon the weather and the atmospheric pressure. So the most accurate way is going to be do the math, right? Figure out what the difference is at sea level to the atmospheric pressure you're actually dealing with right now. But the good news is that the 3.5% or using the chart or the Dive Buddy app are going to get you close enough that it's going to be just fine for you. We've already built a safety margin in everything we're already doing at about 30 to 40% safety margin. So the 4 to 5% off that we're going to be is a standard variance, and you should be fine. Now, Nico, how do you think all this with sea level equivalent depth and diving at altitude is going to affect your ascent rate? We talked about this before.
It would. It'd probably. Oh my gosh. Okay. It'd probably make it like a little longer, kind of, because being at higher altitude, it would make. I don't know.
Well, if you're ascending faster than what you think because of the theoretical depth, should you slow down?
Yeah.
Okay. So how is it going to affect your set rate? You should speed up, stay the same, or slow down?
Slow down.
Absolutely. Josh, how is this going to affect your safety stop, and why?
Sorry, can we go back to the first one? The formula, the most accurate formula is the current sea level pressure divided by your current altitude pressure times your depth.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That's the most accurate one? Okay.
That is absolutely the most accurate one.
Okay.
Good news is I'll send you the slides. So you'll be able to go back into this and actually, ooh, that's kind of fun.
No, I just want to make sure, because the previous slide, I think, just says to use one atmosphere.
Yeah, we generally use 1 atmosphere, because if we're talking about being a 1/10 of 1,000 off or 8/10 of 1,000 off, we're going to be okay, right? When we start talking about, if we're talking about 1,000th of a foot, so we're talking literally of being a foot off, or I'm sorry, not a foot, but an inch off or 2 inches off. An inch or 2 among friends is definitely not going to hurt us. Let's see.
What app is that you use?
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
What app was that you use to get your readings?
Oh, it's called Barometer.
Okay.
and it looks. Let's see. Hold on. Let me put my camera back on so you can see me. It's free on iPhone. I would imagine that they've got one just like it for barometer. There you go.
Okay.
So I do have an altimeter on there as well. And then just kind of fun for you. Let's see. I also really like for diving. I like the solar watch. And then when I dive on the coast or in the islands or anywhere, I have a tide guide as well. And those are some of the apps that I carry with me on a regular basis. So fun stuff. But yeah, the barometer app, it's free. Doesn't cost you anything. You just need to make sure you set it to metric pascals. So.
And then as far as the safety stop goes, you're going to want to make a bit of a shallower safety stop for a longer time.
Yeah, absolutely. Shallower safety stop for longer, add some safety margin to your advantage. Now, would there be any additional considerations for traveling after altitude diving?
Always.
Yeah, if you're a G and you go up another 1,000, then you're going to jump another letter group. So
absolutely. Same thing as if you're flying after diving. Now, one of the interesting things, I like to use the crater as a good example here. After you get done diving at the crater, if you're going to go back to Salt Lake City or anywhere you leave the crater, you're going to rise in altitude at least 2,000 feet to get out of Homestead to get back. So if you're going back to anywhere, you're going to have to rise at least 1,000 to 2,000 feet in elevation. So if you ever decide that you're going to dive the crater, please, once you get out of the crater, wait at least 2 to 4 hours before you drive anywhere, because you do run that risk of getting DCS because of the altitude. Fair enough?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, let's see. Put this back on. I have another question. So, from the SSI altitude pressure variation table, what is the atmospheric pressure at 4,000 foot elevation? Nico?
Hold on, let me. So it's it's A.
0.864. Exactly right. And that's about right for where we're at. In fact, right now the station pressure is reading 0.84. So we're slightly above that, but it's reading 0.84. So interesting enough.
if you're using this table, I would assume that we'd round up, since we're like 4,600 or something.
Exactly. So I would round to 5,000 foot elevation. Absolutely. It's always round to the safer and deeper. You're always going to be better off that way. All right. Let's see. Who haven't I picked on? Justin, have I picked on you?
All the time.
Good.
No.
I'm going to pick on you again then. A diver plans to dive at 4,000 feet to 70 feet fresh water. What is his sea level equivalent depth?
Oh, great. Feet. 6'4". Let's see. That is C.
See, exactly right. How did you arrive at your answer?
Well, I took the 0.864 or 1 divided by 0.864 and then multiplied it by the 70 to give me, it actually came out to like 81 something, but
All right, guys, that is absolutely correct, and that is one way of doing it. What if you had taken and multiplied 4 times 3.5?
You get 79.8.
Exactly. So either one's right? As we look at this, they're both right there at 80 feet. So it just goes to show you both of them work, but they'll be within a foot or two of each other. And I can promise you, even in tech diving, you have to be pretty far in. I mean, you have to be like 18 tank dive for a foot to matter. So you guys will never get to the point where 1 foot of difference is going to make that big a variance. So if you guys like this information and you really want to get bigger into the science of what we're talking about, I encourage taking the Science of Diving class. It's a much more in-depth course on the physics and physiology of diving. It's a course that, as David will tell you, I love to teach. I do know some instructors that somehow they make it through in 1 to 2 sessions. I don't know how they do that. How do you think they do that, David? I haven't figured it out yet.
How they do what exactly?
How do you get through Science of Diving in 1 session?
I don't know that would be a very thorough class.
Yeah, I know an instructor that teaches Science of Diving in 3 hours. I'm like, wow, you must be a genius because I can't teach it in 3 hours. So Science of Diving is at least 4 sessions. I'm actually considering adding a 5th session because I feel like we just don't get into the depth that we want to and really get to the deeper understanding. But it's a great course. We do it over the course of a couple of weeks. We don't take it fast. We want to make sure you understand it. But I definitely encourage it. It's a fun class to teach. And it's a good prerequisite if you're ever going to go into tech diving. Science of Diving is a great one to move you into tech diving and start giving you those advanced principles as well. Let's see, David, you've been through several of my tech courses and watched it on those. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
That was a wholehearted yeah there. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm multitasking.
No worries at all. All right. Okay. All right. Let's see. So safety stops. Now, due to these additional considerations, safety stops, in a sense, must be more closely watched. Safety stops of 3 to 5 minutes at or near 15 feet are recommended for any dive made to a depth of 20 feet or deeper unless an emergency or other safety-related decision or situation dictates otherwise. So because most altitudes are done in higher elevations and the dives are more prone to cold and reduced blood flow to the extremities, it's strongly recommended that you follow these procedures and implement. Number 1, ascent rates should be reduced by 5 feet per minute or more for every dive at 4,000 feet or elevation or more. Safety stop should be adjusted to correct for theoretical depth based upon the dive site. And then finally, safety stop. I always love when I have typos in my stuff. Let's see.
Sorry, it was 5 feet per 1,000. Is that what you said?
5 feet for every 1,000 after 4,000 feet. So, and safety stop time should be increased by a factor of 20% or more for every 4,000 feet of elevation gain. So I'll throw that on screen for you guys to read as well. So ascent rates reduced by 5 feet per minute or more for every 4,000 feet of elevation. Reduce or increase your safety stop by 20% or more for every 4,000 feet. So slow down, take your time. Anybody trying to see the whole dang ocean in one dive anyway? I hope not. Take your time. All these dives. One of the nice things I love the most about diving at altitude is in lakes is when you do a shore dive, it is awesome in that when you're ready to do your ascent, your safety stop, you simply head towards shore. And the advantage to that is you get to paddle along the shoreline and you can do your safety stop in motion. I can tell you I've done plenty of safety stops and deco stops in the ocean. Coming up a line and sitting at 40 feet for 10 minutes in the middle of the ocean where you can't see anything fun and cool sucks. Sitting at 20 feet for an hour, even worse. But the nice thing is if you're doing safety stops and deco stops in a lake, you have the ability to come up the shoreline and enjoy that time of actually getting to see cool stuff. So take your time. Make sure you plan for that as well. So I think we covered that pretty well. So 3.5% for every 1,000 feet, 1 letter group for every 1,000 feet of gained elevation. Pretty simple stuff. That's going to be the crust of what I need you guys to remember because that's going to be important. So let's talk about thermal comfort and thermal equipment. One of the things you guys are going to notice diving high altitude is typically you'll run out of thermal comfort before you run out of dive time. Late in the summer, that starts becoming a problem, but early in the spring, in the wintertime, typically you'll get more cold than you will run out dive time. So the effects of diving in atmosphere, we need to be aware that some of the benefits, we're going to make sure we want to build up and have additional thermal comfort. We're going to want to make sure that we have somewhere to go when and dive or dress in comfort. One of my favorite dives that I like to discuss, Nikki and I were at Redfish Lake the first week in June. We got there and we were getting ready to do a dive off the dock. The air temperature was 10 degrees. And this was like 9 o'clock in the morning. And it was overcast. And we were wearing wet gloves. We actually got so cold on the surface trying to get ready that our fingers were starting to go numb. And as we got into the 35-degree water, the water felt warm and actually warmed our hands up because it was warmer than the air temperature. So be aware, you can definitely get into cold situations. So make sure that you have the benefits around you to be able to be safe and be warm before you get in the water. One of the reasons that it's really easy to get cold in Yellowstone Lake is you spend 15 minutes swimming out to the dive site. So you have that cumulative effect of hypothermia working against you, where you're lowering your core body temperature. So by the time you get to the dive site, you've been in the 38, 35, 40 degree water, whatever it is at this time. I'm hoping for 45 tomorrow, but we'll see. But you have that cumulative effect. So be aware, hypothermia is a real thing as well. So make sure that you're drinking warm liquids and you're staying hydrated. One of the biggest problems that most people don't realize is as you go up in altitude, you're more prone to dehydration. And there's a whole long explanation behind that. We'll just keep the idea that you are more prone to dehydration. So discussion, how would cold affect your nitrogen loading and off-gassing, Josh?
In cold water, you off-gas slower.
Why?
I assume it's just because your body's spending more time trying to heat itself up than off-gassing.
Okay, that's one thought. Steve, what do you think? Why do you think you off-gas slower in cold water?
Well, if it's not what Josh just said, I'm going to say that your blood's probably flowing a little slower, so you're getting less oxygen or less nitrogen oxygen recirculation through your blood, so therefore you're going to off-gas slower.
Okay, that absolutely is part of it. Some of the things that happen, so when you get cold, the first thing that happens is blood shunting, right? That the body stops pushing blood to the extremities. So you have a reduced blood flow. The other thing you have to happen is as you get cold, you start to deal with vasoconstriction. So when you start putting those two things together, vasoconstriction, basically the water hose gets smaller, so it's not able to pump as much water through it. But you also have the idea of less blood flowing too. So you have two ways that blood is being reduced to the extremities. And it's the blood that's going out to the fast and slow tissue that's transporting that oxygen out and transferring that nitrogen back. So between those two things, we have a big problem. We have a third issue as well, is as your tissue and fat. Anybody ever frozen a steak and felt how hard the fat on it gets? Well, as the same thing happens to your body. As it gets cold, the tissue actually hardens as well and reduces the body's ability to on gas and off gas. And then finally, as we talk about this as well, Henry's law, and Henry was a physicist back in the early 1900s, talked about how partial pressures of gases enter the bloodstream. But he also found out is as it gets colder, partial pressures enter the bloodstream and enter to the tissue much more quickly because they're smaller and denser. So it actually, the molecules of air that we're breathing that are 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, actually reduce in size, so they're able to be more permeable. So if it's the idea of trying to pour a bunch of marbles into a bottle versus a bunch of BBs, right? You get more BBs because they can fit into spaces more easily. Anybody ever dropped a half a pound of buckshot in their living room or in your kitchen or in your shop and had to clean that stuff up? Pain in the ass? Absolutely. A lot easier to pick up a big bag of marbles that dropped. Same basic idea. Big marbles easier to pick up. Little BBs hard to pick up because they go everywhere and they get in every little nook and frickin' cranny. As gas gets colder, it becomes more dense. As it becomes more dense, it's able to get into tissue more easily. So, Josh, how do you think reduced atmospheric pressure might affect the surface interval for you on a dive?
I mean, there's less pressure at the surface, so
maybe a longer surface interval.
yeah.
So that's one of the things I'm going to encourage you guys is as you're doing your dive tables and looking at this stuff, make sure you're adding a little extra safety margin by staying out of the water between dives just a little longer. Give your body that chance to off-gas that nitrogen a little bit more thoroughly. Make sense, guys? Yes, no, maybe so?
Yep.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Let's move on to pre-dive checks. Let's see. I'm going to move this over here. So pre-dive checks. Each diver should conduct a functional gear check of all their equipment before a dive. That's just common sense, right, guys? We've all dove enough to know that things happen. So particular attention should be paid, though, to regulators and inflator valves. We were diving, I think, David, I think you were there. We were diving in Belmont and over the winter doing some open water certifications. And we had one of our divers leave their BC in the back of their truck on the drive down. And what happened to the inflator? Were we able to inflate it?
No, it was pretty well frozen into place.
Yep, absolutely. So things happen. Make sure to check to make sure that your valves, your OPV valve isn't frozen shut, that it actually operates. Make sure to check your LP inflator, that it actually functioned. So they'd actually gotten, I could see it. There was a chunk of ice about this big, by about that big around, inside the inflator. We were lucky though, in that we were able to stick the inflator in the warm water and kept trying to actuate it. And eventually the 90 degree water ended up melting. It happens, right? So you got to make sure you take into account. Now, if leakage or free flow is detected in these items, the dive should be postponed until the malfunction is corrected. Why is that, Dave? What could be the problem if diving cold water with a leaky regulator?
Leaky water in?
No, leaky air. You got air leaking out. It's bubbling.
It's going to shorten your dive.
It's going to shorten your dive.
Depending on how fast it's leaking, it could shorten your dive by a couple of minutes, or it could shorten it by a couple of hours.
Absolutely. That's one thing. How about the potential of it freezing open? You ever had a free-flowing regulator?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It can freeze either your first stage or your second stage. It could, it could get worse underwater. You could hit, say you hit 90 feet, you do a deep diving class, you're down at 90 feet, and that all of a sudden decides it's going to give out all the way. Now you're out of air at 90 feet. So,
absolutely. So, guys, if you do have a regulator or inflator valve is found to be free flowing on the surface, it's virtually certainty that it's going to free flow at depth. Likewise, divers should perform a pre-dive buddy check with their fellow divers before each dive. It's easy to forget simple things such as an inflator hose. Now, when you're diving a dry suit, there's 2 inflator hoses to be aware of. And we've absolutely seen an inflator hose get stuck open on a dry suit as well. It absolutely happens. Now, the last time I saw it, it happened to be from sand, not cold, but it definitely becomes a bigger issue. Making sure we're cleaning that stuff and cleaning the seals well enough so that we're able to work with that gear before dives can be imperative. Here's the problem, guys. If I go to Yellowstone on Saturday, I blow to the surface after an hour dive and I get DCS, what happens? Other than I'm in a lot of pain and not really happy. Where's medical attention?
Far away.
Yeah, it's a long ways. In fact, what you find is most Yellowstone accidents from people having the brilliant idea to stick their hands in the hot pots or ride a buffalo or pet a bear, they all come to Idaho Falls. So if I have a dive accident, where am I going?
Idaho Falls.
Yeah,
I mean, at least you'll
it's
be
not
close
going to be
to them.
quick. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to be in a lot of pain for quite a while while I A, wait for them to get to me, and B, while I get from there to back to here. So I've got probably 45 minutes while I'm waiting for them to get to me, and then another hour to get back. Last year, Nikki and I were camping in Yellowstone. We camp in Bridge Bay a lot, and they have these nice porta potty, or not porta potties, but flushing toilets. They have men's room, women's room, and a place to wash your dishes. There was a kid and his grandfather went in the bathroom, and the grandfather had a heart attack. It took about 10 minutes for the first ranger to arrive on scene. Guess what? He's having a cardiac event. Guess what the ranger did not have in his vehicle?
An AED.
No AED. Anybody want to guess how long it took them to get an AED to him?
Too long.
Yeah, he died, but yeah, it took 35 minutes to get an AED to him. So be aware. Dan says 58% of all dive accidents are cardiac related. So in diving altitude, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure is what my grandma would say on this. But take the time, look into basic ideas like this. It's not a bad idea that as part of your pre-dive check, make sure you have a bottle of oxygen with you. David will tell you, everywhere I dive, I've got 2 bottles of oxygen I keep in the back of the truck, just because I know that I've usually got students with me, or I'm diving somewhere where I can't get to medical aid very quickly. And by the way, I do have a suture staple kit that I'm dying to use. So if you, no, I'm just kidding. I'm going to use my suture staple kit one day. So just kidding. But we carry that kind of stuff. So we do pre-dive checks. Before Nikki and I pack our gear tomorrow to go to Yellowstone, we'll go through and we'll clean things. We'll make sure that all the OPV valves work. We'll have extra regulator sets. So we'll make sure that we're pretty clear on that. Now, other things to be aware of as you're doing your pre-dive checks, just like any other time, divers should go through what hand signals they may use in emergency or otherwise, and a quick review of the dive plan and what hazards could be present during that upcoming dive. So being aware of what's going on and planning your dive and diving your plan prevents most accidents. Now, it is recommended that if a diver is going to be at a site that is far away, they bring along a spare regulator in case one of the diver regulators malfunctions. They should also take extra thermal garments, cold weather gear, dry gloves, liners, or anything else that could cause an issue. If you dive a dry suit, one of the most handy things I can tell you positively 7 days a week, twice on Sunday, that you should have in your dive kit is super glue. Anybody want to hear a fun story about why you should carry super glue?
Sure.
So I was diving Yellowstone last year, first dive of the season. Water was 33 degrees. It was cold. The ice had literally come off the day prior. We went out, and I could feel a slight leak in my dry glove, but I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I tried to adjust it. And it was still leaking. But I went ahead and did the dive anyway. My wife yelled at me, so you guys don't have to yell at me now. But went ahead and did the dive, and I could feel the water slowly trickling in. I could feel the pins and needles on my arm, and eventually my arm went numb. And then I got to the point about half hour into the dive where I couldn't make cognitive choices. I couldn't think. I'm at 50 feet. If I ascend right now with a 3-minute safety stop, how long will it take me to get to the surface? I couldn't do that math. And when I realized that I couldn't do that math, I told Nikki, I'm done. I'm out of here. And I went ahead and headed to the surface. And I just followed the dive computer. And I got to my safety stop. Then I popped to the surface, paddled back to the shore 15 minutes later. I was blue. I'd actually gotten hypothermia. My left side of the body was completely blue. All this because I had a hole in my dry suit glove about that big, literally that big. That night, after I dried that out, I found some super glue. I put 4 drops of super glue in it. I let it sit overnight with super glue in it. I used that same dry glove for the next. I just barely took it off this year, so I used it over a year with that drop of super glue in it because it worked perfectly. So if you get a hole in your dry suit, a little bit of super glue goes a long way. I can promise you that. Just be aware of where you're putting it, and if you're running like a Fusion Sport or a Fusion Bullet, make sure you put it on the inside, not the outside, because that has that lycra skin on the outside. So just be aware of kind of how your dry suit works. But a bottle of super glue, and the nice thing is if you get a big enough cut, super glue is amazing there too. So it's like the all-around safety. Have some super glue in your dive kit. Make sure you get a fresh one. Don't have one that you haven't opened in, because if you open it once, you might as well throw it away. Pro tip for you today. So, but bring other gear. So bring in a spare regulator. Nikki and I usually bring a couple of spare first stages, a couple of spare second stages, and we bring spare computers just in case. All divers should be able to disconnect the dry suit low pressure hose. Somebody's pretty loud here. I'm going to go ahead and turn somebody's mic off there. All right. So all divers should be able to disconnect the dry suit low pressure hose from the dry suit inflator valve with gloves or mitted hands, as well as the LP hose from your BC. Why do you think that's important, guys? Nico, why would it be important that I be able to disconnect the hose from my inflator?
So you could like rinse it kind of, or like take care of it.
How about on a dive? Why would I want to do that on a dive?
I don't know.
What would happen if you got a leak on your LP inflator hose, or it went to free flow and froze open while you're on a dive, and it just continually is adding air to your BC?
You'd start ascending it like faster than you should be.
Okay.
You could pass your safety stop.
How would you stop that? If all of a sudden your inflator wouldn't stop inflating, how could you stop that?
I don't know.
Could you disconnect your inflator hose?
Oh yeah, probably.
Absolutely. So you need to be able, if you have that issue, and I've seen it happen. It absolutely does happen. I've seen it on a dry suit and I've seen it on a BC. If that happens, all you need to do is be able to disconnect it, but you need to be able to disconnect it. So whatever gloves you're wearing, you need to make sure that you're able to reach over and disconnect your inflator or disconnect your dry suit. Okay. So make sure as you guys do this, that you're always practicing with your gear to be safe. So let's see. Steve, how can redundant equipment help you in high altitude diving before the dive?
Just the things that you've talked about at higher elevations, you may have some equipment failures, and then if you have redundant equipment, then you'll be able to continue diving.
Absolutely. Justin, how about during the dive? What would be the point of having redundant equipment during a dive?
For safety, one. I mean, if you had equipment that failed, you definitely want to have backup.
Absolutely. What redundant equipment would you carry on a high altitude dive, Justin?
Regulators.
So, but during your dive, what redundant during the dive equipment would you carry?
Maybe your dive computer. You'd have your dive computer that you wear on your wrist, and then you'd have your one that's attached to your BC so that you could check them against each other.
Absolutely. So a second computer. What else?
Probably lights. Maybe.
Absolutely. I can tell you from personal experience, having a spare light, it can be a godsend, especially on a deep dive. Perfect. David, what other backup equipment might be nice during a dive? You might be muted too.
I mean, two of everything's going to be nice. But for me, the biggest things is where we're in Idaho, anything rubber. So mask strap, fin strap, O-rings.
So you're going to carry, during the dive. So you
probably like in the water during the dive?
During a dive.
2 knives.
Yep, that's a great one. Nico, what's something else you might carry that's extra during a dive?
Probably I forgot what they were called, the like things on the reels, the yellow diver balloon thing.
Oh, DSMBs?
Yeah, I forgot what. Yeah, those.
There you go. Yeah, absolutely. DSMBs, absolutely. So I always carry two. And I carry two reels or spools with me. Anybody ever thought about carrying a spare mask?
Yeah, I carry a spare mask.
You carry it with you on your dive?
Oh no, but I have it above the water.
What would happen if you put it in a pocket and carried a spare mask with you on a dive?
It could probably fall out.
I'm definitely gonna encourage you do carry a spare mask. I think Dave would attest to this. That whenever you guys see me dive, I wear tech shorts with pockets. I carry a spare mask. I carry a spare knife, spare cutting utensils, spare scissors, and a spare S&B and reel. And a lot of times I'll have a 250-pound lift bag in one of my pockets as well. So I carry a few things in pockets. David, does it look like I'm overweighted or over geared up?
Nope.
No, they're pretty compact, right? Honestly, unless you knew I was carrying all that those extra items, you probably wouldn't know that I had them. So it has to take a lot of space, and you don't need to look like a Swiss Army knife diver. But if you pack it right and you do it well, you can certainly carry extra items as well. Now, as we start getting into high altitude diving, some of the things we want to start talking about as other types of redundancies as well. My least favorite on these are the H valves and the Y valves, but at least offers some starting point of additional redundancy. You can get a Y valve, and the reason they call it a Y valve because it looks like a Y, and you can put 2 first stage odds on it and 2 second stages. The advantages of doing something like an H valve or Y valve is you're able to turn one off. So if something happens and the primary regulator that you are currently breathing on goes to free flow, you can reach back and you can turn that valve off, and you can breathe the other one. Same thing with an H valve. Now, my preference in this is to carry either a pony bottle or a completely redundant cylinder. These are my least favorite options. My second least favorite option is strapping a freaking tank to your current tank. David, why do you think that might be a bad idea to strap a tank, your spare tank behind you? There's a few.
Ease of access.
Exactly. Ease of access. Josh, why wouldn't you want to strap a tank behind you?
I mean, you're adding another foot behind yourself.
Exactly. Buoyancy characteristics as well. Justin, can you come up with one more reason?
I don't know. Probably if it comes loose, it's going to be pretty difficult to know if it came loose.
It definitely could come loose. What happens if there's a leak in that valve and it drains all your gas during your dive?
That too. You probably wouldn't even notice.
You would not notice at all. And you go to thinking you have a nice pony cylinder, you go take a breath of air on that, and all of a sudden, poof, nothing there. So one of the things I would encourage you guys is look into getting a slung pony bottle. I like it because here's how I do it. I got to adjust real quick. Let's see. And go back over to this. Solo layout. So here's one of mine. I keep it right here. This one's loaded up with 49% nitrox. I run a pretty high blend of nitrox. But simply enough, the way I run this is I clip it off and I bunge it off to my left-hand side. Before I put it on, I've got my first stage on it. I charge it. I check to make sure there's pressure in it. And then I turn it off. Once it's charged and ready to go, I turn it right off. And it sits right on my left-hand side right here. So when I'm ready to use it or I need it, all I need to do is reach over, turn it on, and then put it in my mouth. And the nice thing with turning it off after I've charged it is it's ready to go. It's already got 3 breaths in the LP hose, but I can guarantee that if I turn it off, there'll be gas when I go to need it, right? Simple enough. So it gives me an additional level of safety. The other nice thing about this as well, if I'm diving along on this and David suddenly has an out of gas emergency, I can turn this on and hand him the hose. And then here you go, David, take the whole tank. You don't need to breathe off mine. That's my gas. I'm not your pony bottle of feelings or lipstick. Take my bottle. right? By the way, you'll have to Venmo me $127 for the tank rental and gas, but that's okay. We'll Venmo later, right? I take PayPal too. Just kidding. But it gives you that opportunity that you get more options. So, guys, as you start thinking about your redundancies and how you dive and what you dive and where you dive and what you do, I want you guys to start thinking resources. If I have this, how am I going to actually use it? So I like to bring up the idea of the pony bottles, because as I start putting this stuff together, how am I going to actually use it? What's the advantage to me? What's the advantage to my dive buddy? And how can I make sure that I'm putting this together the safest way possible? Of these 4 options, my personal suggestion is a separate slung pony bottle. If you do it right, and if you guys would ever come out to the dive shop, we'll sit down and I will teach you how to sling a pony bottle correctly so that it doesn't dangle around like a superfluous foot, right? We'll make sure that you're taken care of on that. I'm happy to teach you how to do that and how to sling it. David, I think, will attest that at this point I know how to sling a pony bottle. So I've definitely done enough. But if you have no other options, at least some form of additional safety margin is going to be to your advantage. Having it on the back, I just don't like the balance point of it. It's horrible. It's just not to your advantage. Other things to be aware of: make sure that you're diving with a cold weather and cold water rated regulator. The regulators you see on the screen, that's the MTXRs from Apex. They are great, and they're currently rated to extreme cold weather. I have dove those. They're very nice. They breathe really well, and I've never seen one freeze up. I tend to dive the XTX 50s, which is the step below this. That's only rated for very cold water instead of extreme cold water, and they're designed to do that. They're also environmentally sealed to make sure that water's not getting into the first stage and to help with the pressure. And they're diaphragmic in nature. Interesting story for you guys. One of the things we find out in diving cold water, that if you're diving to 0 or 10 degrees below 0, diaphragmic is absolutely positively the way to go. If you're diving cold water and the air temperature is below 10 degrees water, you want to go to a piston regulator. Anybody know why you want to use a piston regulator in extreme cold weather? Thoughts, comments? Go ahead.
Well, the piston has fewer moving parts, doesn't it?
About the same amount of moving parts. Mechanical versus diaphragm.
I would guess the diaphragm would get hard. Wouldn't be as flexible.
When you start getting below negative 10 degrees, they both will freeze. The advantage to a piston regulator is because it's all mechanical. It doesn't have those rubber parts. It defrosts faster. So, and that comes to that little tip and tidbit comes to us from our friends at Dive Alaska, sponsored by Alex at Dive Alaska, right? So that's what they've discovered. The piston regulators are generally discouraged for cold water diving, but when it comes to extreme cold water diving, we're diving 33-degree water in sub 10 degrees air temperature. Dive Alaska suggests the piston regulator simply for the fact that they defrost faster. They're able to get them working again more quickly. A diaphragmic regulator, because of the plastics and the rubbers, takes longer to defrost. Interesting, quick tip for you for the day. Now, the other thing to be aware of is dive computers. Whatever dive computer you're diving, you definitely need to take time and go to the manual and determine, will my dive computer set automatically or manually for the altitude I'm diving? Dive computers will add a pressure additional calculation to your diving to help ensure your safety. It's not perfect by any amount of stretch, but it'll slow your ascents down a little bit. It'll also change your safety tables, but they're still not perfect, and you still need to take into account the information we previously provided. But for example, if you're diving a Sunto Eon Core, you need to manually set the altitude. If you're diving a Perdix or a Apex DSX or a Garmin Mark II, Mark II-I, or a Garmin Mark I for that matter, or the Garmin G1, or a Ratio, those will automatically set. Let's see, who else? If you're diving an Aqualung, or a Oceanic, like the Oceanic Pro Plus 3, Plus 4, Aqualung I-550, Aqualung 750, or Aqualung 770. You'll need to manually set those and be aware that those do not calculate automatically. So be aware, and as you're diving with a computer, what your computer is actually able to do. It's definitely to your advantage to understand that as well. So visibility is definitely a real meaningful thing. As we start to get into this visibility, we've all dove right where we get a pretty good understanding. Be aware. Visibility considerations, the surface swim to get out to your dive site, environmental conditions, water temp. The other thing to be aware of is in lakes. I have gotten entangled in stuff more in lakes than I have anywhere else in the world. In fishing line, in ropes and other things as well. So definitely being aware of that kind of stuff is definitely to your advantage to understand. The other thing as well is some of the fun places to dive, river diving. River diving is a lot of fun and it's a lot more excitement, but you need to make sure you have a very good balanced regulator. You're taking into account the safety concerns. Are you going to be able to do a safety stop? Are there going to be entanglement hazards with rocks and the current as well? If you're interested in taking a river diving class, I do teach that. It's a lot of fun. And we finish up our dives at John's Hole Bridge. We'll go out to 75 to 80 feet and we'll see the sturgeon together. And you'll get the opportunity to learn what I lovingly call a braille dive. Anybody know what a braille dive is?
Blind.
Exactly. If you can't feel it, you can't see it. But the good news is once you get past into depth at John's Hole, it clears up. It's just dark, but it's neat because you're in sand and you can't muck the bottom. If you lay on the bottom and you stir it up, it just pushes away pretty quickly. So it's definitely a lot of fun. It's a fun dive. It's a big kid dive. As we kind of continue through this cavalcade of values, be aware that you definitely need to make sure that any of these dives, you have a good idea where the location of the emergency services is, where your O2 kit provider kit is, the distance to a chamber, and if I can get to an AED. As you get into river diving and you start getting into lake diving, definitely make sure that the number one emergency procedure you're ever going to get into is going to be a simple 4-step act. We talk about this in open water. We talk about this in stress and rescue. We're going to talk about it tonight just briefly. David, what's that 4-step procedure to avoiding an emergency? You're on mute again. There you go.
Plan your dive. Dive your plan. Dive within your training and abilities. And always dive with a buddy.
Absolutely. How about during the dive? There's 4 steps that we're going to do during the dive to help prevent an emergency. If something bad were to happen, what do we do?
Stop, breathe, think, act.
Exactly. So as you guys get into these situations, we're starting to go out and do these dives, make sure we're taking that time. If you get to a problem, stop. Don't do anything else. Breathe. And I like to say 3 good deep breaths. Accelerate getting that carbon dioxide out of your system. Think, what's the next action I can do that will take me closer to safety? And then finally, once I decided what that next step should be, then act. I've got a friend, his name's Mike. He's a world-class and world record-holding CCR cave diver. Gone deeper in caves than probably most people ever dream of going, right? And he got into a cave they were doing in New Mexico, diving. And they actually ended up losing somebody. And he said he thought he was dead 3 separate times on this dive. As he was doing this dive, he finally, I asked him, I says, well, what did you do? He says, every time he got into one of those negative situations where he's sure he was going to dive, the first thing he did was stop. He breathed, he thought about it, and he said, I'm not going to make one more single move until I'm sure that move is going to take me 1 step closer to safety instead of 1 step farther away. So be aware. As we start doing these river divings and these more complex dives, and we're doing dives farther away from safety, make sure you guys are taking that time to stop, breathe, think, and then act. Okay? Simple enough? All right. We've gone through quite a bit at this point. What questions do you guys have? No questions?
I don't have any.
Okay. We're going to talk a little bit of, I feel like you guys got a pretty good handle on DCS and on hypothermia. We live in Idaho, so if you don't have a pretty good idea what hypothermia is, we need to have a different discussion. But I'd like to talk to you about immersion pulmonary edema. This is a very little and lightly studied problem. What pulmonary immersion edema is the result of a combination of immersing the water in the body in cold water. And it's the body's response to that. Now, things that will increase your chances of getting immersion pulmonary edema are going to be hypertension, like high blood pressure, can contribute to the risk. Hydration, exercise. Extreme levels of exercise can contribute to IPO, as well as the fitness level of the diver themselves. Now, the first case I ever read about pulmonary immersion or immersion pulmonary edema was a dive in just outside of London in a quarry, very large quarry. There was a very skilled instructor and his assistant. They were all diving twin sets. They took a student who had claimed that they had no medical problems on a dive, and they were doing a deep dive course. They swam for about 15 minutes out of the quarry to the dive flag and did the ascent. Before they did the ascent at the dive flag, the student complained of being out of breath and having a hard time catching his breath. So they stopped. They gave him time. He still was having a hard time, but they finally agreed that he was ready to do the dive. They got down to 120 feet and did a 15-minute dive. As they got ready to start the ascent, the student suddenly complained that he was out of gas. He's got twin sets on. They were running LP85, so he should have had more than enough gas. So the instructor, being a good instructor, went ahead and had him air share with his assistant, knowing that the assistant would have gas. As they began the ascent, they got to about 40 feet, and the student again complained of being out of gas, out of air. They got so at the 15-foot mark, and when they started their safety stop, the instructor, knowing he had plenty of gas, gave the student his regulator, knowing he had plenty of gas. Once he started breathing, the student began to panic. As the student began to panic, they realized the instructor knew that they needed to continue a safety stop per the standards of PADI. So he grabbed the student and had him calm down, got into breathing, and held him down for about a minute of the 3-minute safety stop. Okay, so they finally ascended, and as they ascended, he got to the surface, and the diver went into cardiac arrest. They drug him to the shore, began CPR, but unfortunately the diver passed away. What had happened later on is they found out is it appeared as if he had drowned, and they blamed the instructor because it appeared as if he had drowned. As the medical examiner did the postmortem, what they discovered in deeper study was that this student had hypertension and was on high blood pressure medication. He'd answered that he did not have high blood pressure because he was on the medication and felt that he was okay. What had happened with the pulmonary immersion edema is literally the lungs had begun to sweat in the cold water and create liquid instead of air. And as they created more and more liquid, the lungs filled with water, and he literally drowned from the inside out, not from inhalation of water, but from a buildup of water in his lungs because of this disease. So what pulmonary immersion edema does is it causes the lungs to produce water and cause you to drown. Signs and symptoms of pulmonary or immersion pulmonary edema are breathing difficulties, confusion, swimming in the wrong direction or random directions, inability to carry out normal functions whilst appearing to have to concentrate on breathing, belief that a regulator is not working properly, indications of out of gas when the regulators are found to be working correctly and with adequate gas supplies, refusing or rejecting an alternate air source or complaining of being out of gas, and indications of difficulty breathing when on the surface. Now, how do we treat for IPO? You sit them upright if they're conscious. You make sure to give them oxygen, keep them warm, and seek a medical treatment immediately. And do not give fluids. Okay, it's a pretty rare thing to happen, but diving cold water definitely increases your chances of immersion pulmonary edema considerably. So just be aware if you have any signs of hypertension at all or high blood pressure, be aware that you increase your chances of immersion pulmonary edema considerably. Sound good? Anybody ever heard of IPO before other than David?
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I've never heard of it.
It is definitely a different one. All right. You guys ready for your final exam?
Sure.
Cool. I will go round robin style. If you have a question on something, let me know. But we'll start with Justin because you're the first one on my screen.
Oh boy.
Justin, what is the minimum altitude to be considered an altitude dive?
B, 1,000 feet.
Justin, ding, ding, ding. Give Justin 1 point right there. All right. Josh, you're number 2 on my cavalcade values. What is the maximum recommended altitude for altitude diving?
10,000.
Ding, ding, ding. You got a point too. You get a point. You get a point. You get a point. All right.
I prefer a car, but I mean, I guess I'll take a point.
That's all I got for you today. I might have a Matchbox car in the other room. In fact, I do. I'm sure I do. I'll get you a Matchbox. You want a fire truck or a sports car? I got both. So there you go. All right. Yeah, my grandson just left, and we have a bucket of toys we keep at the house just for the grandson. So I'll get you a Matchbox car next time I see you. All right. Let's see. Nico. There are several contributing factors for decompression illness. Which one is the greatest concern for altitude divers?
Dehydration.
Dehydration is exactly right. Good job, Nico. You get a point. Nice. All right. Steve, you're the next on my cavalcade of values here. You can identify all high altitude dive sites by the presence of mountainous terrain.
That is false.
That is absolutely false. You get a point too. All right, we're back to Justin. Justin, at sea level, a flexible gas container filled with container is submerged to 33 feet. At that depth, it has a volume of 1 cubic feet. What will the volume of the container be if it's brought to the surface directly? At sea level.
B, 2 cubic feet.
2 cubic feet is exactly right. All right, Josh, your question is the same container from question 5 is brought to the surface, but at an altitude of 3,000 feet. What will be the volume when it reaches the surface?
D.
D is exactly right. All right. Nico, are you ready?
Yep.
From the SSI altitude pressure variation table, what is the atmospheric pressure at 4,000 feet?
A.
A is exactly right. Good job. You guys are doing great so far. All right. Steve, the most common dive tables rely on the minimum hydrostatic cap of what at the surface?
B.
B is exactly right. You guys are doing great. All right. Back to Justin. A diver plans a dive to 4,000 feet at 70 feet fresh water. What is the sea level equivalent depth or the sled?
C.
C is exactly right. How did you come up with that? I think I already asked you this one once.
Yeah, I did it earlier. So I already did math on it. But exactly. It's the 1 divided by whatever the
0.684.
Yeah.
Yep. So what's an easier way to do that?
You could take, what is it? I look at my notes here. So it's 4,000 feet. So you take 4 times 3.5
Ding, ding, ding. You got it. I trust that you got it now. Yep, 3.5. Multiply by 3.5 for every 1,000 feet. Easy enough. All right, Joshua. What advantage does a valve with a separate outlet provide for an altitude diver?
A.
Thank you for not saying C. That's why I have it. It looks techie. Just kidding. But A is exactly right. A redundant system in case of freeze up.
I don't know. I feel like extra hoses would be less techy.
There you go. All right. Nico. Sorry.
Yeah.
What is the preferred method of preventing hypothermia while diving at altitude?
B.
B is exactly right. Good job, Nico. All righty, Steve. A safety stop depth should be adjusted as you ascend in altitude.
That is true. B.
Good job. All right, back to Justin. A number of water skills are vital to managing risk on every dive. Which of the following skills is the most critical to altitude diving specifically?
I'd probably say A.
And you would be right. All right. Let's see. Joshua, a diver computes a dive to a sled of 60 feet freshwater for 45 minutes. What is the minimum surface interval before ascending 4,000 feet? Does that help you?
Can you go back to the other one? It was 60 feet at 4,000.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's this ascending 4,000 feet.
Oh, he's ascending from sea level.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let me pull up the dive table. So 60 feet, 40 minutes. He'd come out as G. So to ascend 4.
And that one was translated from German, but
to travel 4,000. I guess
8 hours.
8 hours. Okay. What's the math on that?
How did you come up with that?
Absolutely.
Oh, you're looking for them to become all the way to an A group diver.
All the way to an A group diver. That's
okay. That was my problem. I was just trying to go down 4, which would be 4 hours for them. But
exactly. And I need to add that some of these questions were translated from German, and I didn't add all the. Let's see. What is the minimum surface interval to become an A group diver? Let's add a little clarification on that. There we go. To become an A group diver. Okay, so a diver completes travel from a location that is 5,000 feet above his home location for a dive. What letter group for residual nitrogen would the diver need to start with to account for the elevation difference? 5,000 feet.
You want me to answer this one?
Yes, please.
It'd be F.
F is exactly right. Thank you. All right. A diver is diving at altitude, can make repetitive dives in the same dive. Nico, true or false?
False.
We can't?
Oh, wait, hold on. No, true. Sorry, one of the words, disappeared.
No worries. As long as he's following the dive tables and following a good dive plan, he absolutely can. All right. Well, congratulations. Now I will be sending over the notes. I'm going to turn that off, David. I keep turning you off, by the way. That would be me. Safety. There we go. All right, some of this was converted from German. What I'll be doing is sending these over. So if you guys would like, you can absolutely screenshot this screen, this screen, this screen, and this screen. I'll go slowly if you'd like. Or I could just send it to you as a PDF. Which would you guys prefer?
PDF.
PDF.
Perfect. I will be sending you guys 3 questions from the presentation we gave, but I'll send it with the PDF for your review. If you guys wouldn't mind, there'll be 2 pieces of information in your that you'll need to send back. The first one will look like.
Can you go to the next slide real quick, Ben?
You bet.
So I guess because this one says we're taking altitude divided by sea level, but the other one is 1 over your current altitude.
Exactly. This is the more accurate way of doing it by taking the actual atmospheric pressure at sea level. So that's where I came up with this. So this is the most accurate form, is using the actual atmospheric pressure.
It flips from the first formula then?
It does.
Okay. I was a little bit confused about that.
Stop screen share. So let me show you what you guys are going to get in the mail. Let's see. Email. Does anybody actually use the mail anymore for anything useful other than junk mail? Let's see.
Yeah, I mean, I got a set of fins in the mail today.
Well, there you go. That's not really the mail. That's package delivery. All right, that's not what I was looking for. Give me a second here. Let's see. I'm going to pull Steve's up real quick. Share screen. Present. Share screen. Share screen. There we go. So this is what you all are going to get in the email. If you wouldn't mind, all you need to do is fill out initial in dry land, initial in academic session, and initial in student initials for final exam. So I need 3 places for you to initial, please. And then if you wouldn't mind, please go down to the bottom, student signature, date it. And if you need a parent or guardian, David, we'll go ahead and find one, somebody that's over 18 that is willing to sign for you. So if you wouldn't mind, print that, send it over to me. You can put in program name if you'd like, or I'll do it for you. It's not a big deal, but all I need is 3 initials, 1, 2, 3, and your signature and a date for that, as well as the 3 questions I'm going to send over to you answered. I will end the recording.